Excited to have you with me. Welcome. The phone number, if you want to be a part of the program, 877-97-ERIC, 877-973-7425. Well, the Israel-Hamas situation took an interesting turn this weekend. If you are a subscriber to my daily email, I had to send one out on Saturday because Israel blew up the Associated Press headquarters in Gaza. If you listen to the story from the media, you know, the media loves to make the story about themselves. The media only really gets engaged in a story when there's an angle about which the media can make it about themselves. And so the angle this weekend from the Associated Press was that Israel blew up its headquarters. The CEO of the Associated Press, Gary Pruitt, released a statement saying he was shocked and horrified that the Israeli military would target and destroy the building housing AP's bureau and other news organizations in Gaza. That's right. Israel blew up a building that housed major media outlets in Gaza. You would never know it from the reporting. In fact, let me read you just real quick. Diary from Faraz Akram of the Associated Press. My colleagues' shouts awakened me, and the pounding of my heart drowned out the racing of my mind. What was happening? Had someone been injured on the street of Gaza City, or worse? It was 1:55 p.m. on Saturday. I had been napping on the upper floor of the two-floor penthouse that served as the Associated Press's offices in Gaza City since 2006. This was not unusual in recent days. Since fighting began earlier this month, I had been sleeping in our news bureau until early afternoon, then working through the night. I hurried downstairs and saw my colleagues donning helmets and protective vests. They were shouting, "Evacuate, evacuate." The Israeli military, I would later learn, had targeted our building for destruction and offered up a brief advanced warning. They had taken out 3 buildings so far this week, warning residents and occupants, sometimes minutes beforehand, to get out. Hurriedly, I was told, you have 10 minutes. I put on my helmet and ran. You would never know from this Associated Press reporter, nor from any of the other reports from the Associated Press, nor from the reports of most media outlets, that the Associated Press, Al Jazeera, and other media outlets were actually operating out of a Hamas terror operations facility. That's right. It is confirmed. This is not made up. It is confirmed. It is documented. Even Tommy Vietor from the Obama White House has confirmed that it was a Hamas operation that the Associated Press was operating from. You would never know that, would you? It reminds me very much of the media during the early days of the coronavirus, wondering where it came from. Tom Cotton and others speculated maybe the weapons lab in Wuhan, and the media screamed, "No, it's not racist. No, it's not. How dare you say that?" And now the media's like, well, of course it was. No big deal. It's just the racists were being racist. Israeli intelligence, according to the Jerusalem Post, showed the United States how Hamas operated in the same building. Officials in more than one government office confirmed that President Biden's phone call with Netanyahu on Saturday wasn't part about the bombing of the building, and that Israel showed Biden and American officials the intelligence behind the action. We showed them the smoking gun, proving Hamas worked out of the building. I understand they found the explanation satisfactory. Netanyahu confirmed the source's remark when asked about the Jerusalem Post reporting in an interview with the U.S. TV show Face the Nation. We share all the intelligence with our American friends, he said. The intelligence we had is about an intelligence office for Hamas housed in the building that plots and organizes terror attacks on Israeli civilians. It's a perfectly legitimate target. By the way, when the military or any force takes over a building, that building becomes a target. This is settled international law of war. You don't want the military taking over the facility or the terrorist group. Well, you either need to get them out or you need to move out. By the way, The Atlantic in 2014 ran a story on this very topic. During the Gaza war this summer, this is from Maddie Friedman, November 30th, 2014. During the Gaza war this summer, it became clear that one of the most important aspects of the media-saturated conflict between Jews and Arabs is also the least covered: the press itself. The Western press has become less an observer of this conflict than an actor in it, a role with consequences for the millions of people trying to comprehend current events, including policymakers who depend on journalistic accounts to understand a region where they consistently seek and fail to productively intervene. As an essay I wrote for Tablet on this topic in the aftermath of the war sparked intense interest. In the article, pay attention to this part, based on my experiences between 2006 and 2011, as a reporter and editor in the Jerusalem Bureau of the Associated Press, one of the world's largest news organizations, I pointed out the existence of a problem and discussed it in broad terms. Using staffing numbers, I illustrated the disproportionate media attention devoted to this conflict relative to other stories, and gave examples of editorial decisions that appeared to be driven by ideological considerations rather than journalistic ones. Now, he goes on to say, begin with a simple illustration. The above photo, there's an above photo, it's of a Islamic Jihad at Al-Quds University in East Jerusalem. It's a rally. They're all dressed in black giving Nazi salutes. The above photograph is of a student rally held last November at Al-Quds University, a mainstream Palestinian institution in East Jerusalem. The rally, in support of the armed fundamentalist group Islamic Jihad, featured actors playing dead Israeli soldiers and a row of masked men whose stiff-arm salute was returned by some of the hundreds of students in attendance. I'm not using the photo to make the case the Palestinians are Nazis. The Palestinians are not Nazis. They are, like Israelis, human beings dealing with a difficult situation. I cite it now for a different reason. Such an event at a university like Al-Quds, headed at the time by a well-known moderate professor and with ties to sister institutions in America, indicates something about the winds not blowing in Palestinian society and across the Arab world. The rally is interesting for the visual connections it makes between radical Islam here and elsewhere in the region. A picture like this could help explain why many perfectly rational Israelis fear withdrawing their military from East Jerusalem and the West Bank. The image from the demonstrations were, as photo editors like to say, strong. The event took place a short drive from the homes and offices of hundreds of international journalists based in Jerusalem. Journalists were aware of it. The sizable Jerusalem Bureau of the AP, for example, which can produce several stories on an average day, was in possession of photos. Jerusalem editors decided the image and the rally were not newsworthy, and the demonstration was only mentioned by the AP weeks later. I mention these instances to demonstrate the kinds of decisions being made regularly in the bureaus of the foreign press covering the situation. He goes on to note that the Associated Press has for years been in facilities operated with Hamas. The AP staff in Gaza City would witness a rocket launch right beside their office, endangering reporters and other civilians nearby, and the AP wouldn't report it, not even in AP articles about Israeli claims that Hamas was launching rockets from residential areas. This happened. Hamas fighters would burst into the AP's Gaza bureau and threaten the staff, and the AP wouldn't report it. This also happened. An AP spokesman confirmed that armed militants entered the AP's Gaza office in the early days of the war to complain about a photo showing the location of a rocket launched, though he said Hamas claimed the men did not represent the group. The AP does not report many interactions with militias, armies, thugs, or governments. These incidents are part of the challenge of getting out the news and not themselves news. Like hell, the Associated Press has been renting an... Now, question, were they paying Hamas money for the building, or were they giving it as a gift? Hamas is a designated, internationally designated terrorist organization. Was or is the Associated Press giving money to an internationally designated terrorist organization, or did they just take it as a gift? Hamas is using it as a terror facility, and the AP, Al Jazeera, and others are operating out of there, and they haven't reported that side of the story. They wanted you to believe that they were willfully targeted by Israel to censor the news, when in fact Israel was targeting a Hamas facility. Hamas is a terrorist group, and the Associated Press was working there. This is a pretty damning indictment of the situation in the Middle East and why you can't get a lot of real news out of there. I was explaining this to my kid this morning. She's been following people online. This came to a head last week when she got an Apple News alert about Palestine. She can't find Palestine on the map. What's Palestine? I've explained to you before what Palestine is. If you need it, you can text data to 33777. I'll send you back the link. Palestine is a fiction. It used to exist on a map. It was created by the Emperor Hadrian in 135 AD. The name stuck. It was a way to rub it in the Jews' faces when Hadrian evicted them all and banned them from being in Israel, in the province of Judea. The name stuck. It was a British territory called Palestine, and it was designated as the Jewish homeland, and they were allowed to return, and they changed the name to Israel, and the Arabs refused to go along with it. I explained to my child the history of this, and she commented that she's had to unfollow a number of people who she's realized are just pushing propaganda, not telling the truth of the situation. I explained to her that the media is deeply sympathetic to the Palestinians in large part because so many members of the media have internalized left-wing dogma about colonizers, and they view the Israelis as white people colonizers. And so the Israelis are always the bad people. NBC News sent out this: at least 188 Palestinians, including 55 children, have been killed in Gaza over the past week, according to figures from its health ministry. In Israel, 10 people have been killed. Did you know that the health ministry in Gaza is run by Hamas, which also sent out a picture of one of the victims of Israel? And the Israelis were quickly able to document it's a 5-year-old picture of a little girl who's not even in the area. They're running a propaganda campaign, and the media is on the side of terrorists. Is it any wonder nobody believes them? I mean, honest to goodness, people. We've got an actual terrorist group trying to wipe out a nation, and the media is on their side. The media has picked the bad guy, and the bad guy are the Israelis because they've internalized anti-Western left-wing sentiment about Israel. This is absurd. And yet this is where we are. This is why you can't believe our major institutions. Is it any wonder so many people are willing to believe conspiracy theories these days? You've got the American media siding with the terrorist group. Israel, even the Associated Press's reporter who worked in the Hamas building noted, gave them a heads up to get out of the building. Israel does that. It tells people to leave your area, we're about to bomb it. Hamas fires thousands of rockets, hoping to kill as many Jews as possible. In the Washington Post, they're actually running a story. Israel's Iron Dome defense system protects Israeli lives. It also perpetuates the Israel-Gaza conflict. This is the actual subtitle. The system has saved lives on both sides of the border, but leaves little incentive for a political solution. In other words, the Washington Post is giving airtime to the idea if only more Jews died, maybe they would want to seek peace with a terrorist organization that wants them all dead. This is the American mainstream media in bed with terrorists, actually renting their office space from a terrorist organization, thereby helping fund the terrorists themselves. They've picked a side, and it's not the side anyone should be on. I guess Donald Trump was right. Some of them actually are enemies of the people. They're certainly enemies of the Israelis for sure.
I really do like his opinion on things.
Erick.
Hello and welcome. It is Erick Erickson here, the Erick Erickson Show. The phone number is 877-97-ERIC, 877-973-7425. You know, remarkably, MSNBC now has on two hosts who are getting praise for having on a bunch of Palestinians and very few Israelis. Essentially, you're getting more from MSNBC propaganda. But this Washington Post, now, to be fair, this is an analysis piece. The Washington Post actually has an analysis piece that Israel's Iron Dome situation makes the situation worse because it keeps so many people alive. Hamas, the Islamist movement that rules Gaza and other militias, has fired more than 1,700 rockets into Israel since Monday in response to the threat of eviction of Palestinian residents. Israel has responded with a massive air campaign. When President Obama granted $225 million to Israel in 2014 to help fund the Iron Dome, the White House press secretary said the U.S. is proud that the Iron Dome has saved countless Israeli lives. But the unintended consequences of this protective system complicate the story. By reducing the expected costs of bombing Gaza, Iron Dome allows Israel to act with less concern for civilian casualties and gives Israel less incentive to find a political solution to its conflict with Gaza. Casualty sensitivity, which mounted in Israel after the invasion of Lebanon in the early 1980s, was among the driving forces behind their withdrawal from Gaza in 2005. This syndrome led Israel to shift risk from Israeli troops onto Gazan civilians. You got that? This is a politely worded op-ed analysis piece in the Washington Post that is making the argument the Iron Dome is bad because it allows Jews to survive terrorist attacks. This is what amounts to actual analysis in the Washington Post. If only more Jews died, maybe Israel wouldn't be so willing to fight back against the terrorists. Unreal, but not unexpected. To the phones we go, to Bo in Marietta. Welcome to the program.
Good morning. I enjoy interchanges on Instagram with you, but and this is not really a pro-Palestine state or anything like that. It's just a question. What would be the negative aspect of creating the Palestine state? That seems like something that they wanted, and we obviously know that they deny Israel's right to exist. But what could be the balance there? Is there any give and take there?
Israel, including Netanyahu, have come out in favor of a two-state solution. Now, you really wouldn't know that from a lot of the media coverage here, but the Israelis are totally fine with a two-state solution. There are some quibbles about where the state would be defined. By and large, Gaza has that autonomy. They have they've got an elected leader, not that they've wanted to have elections in about a decade. The question really has to issue, though, is there's still a lot of, I guess, skepticism that the Palestinians really do want a two-state solution, as opposed to having a solution where the Palestinians build up an army to try to invade Israel once they've got their separate state. Now, Palestinian officials have really said the big sticking point for them now is Jerusalem. They want Jerusalem as their capital. They don't want to share Jerusalem as their capital. The Israelis have said that they would be very happy with a state as long as they can figure out a way to divide up Jerusalem and keep the Palestinians from building up an army to then invade them. But, I mean, essentially what you have is a bunch of bad actors in Hamas that makes it very impossible. So, for example, Hamas largely controls the Gaza Strip, and they've been using it to stockpile terrorist armaments there. You can't really have a two-state solution with people who want to drive you into the sea and wipe you out. So we deal with that. I think they can get to it. Now, I got about 15 seconds, Bo. I hope that answers your question. 15. I got to leave it there. But, yeah, if Hamas would let go of terrorism, I think you could get peace in the Middle East. They just won't do it. Hi there, it is Erick Erickson here. Here's you something. The Supreme Court has accepted Dobbs versus Jackson's Women's Health. That's a case out of Mississippi, questioning whether all pre-viability prohibitions on elective abortions are unconstitutional. Whether all pre-viability prohibitions on elective abortions are unconstitutional. So, can there be further restrictions on abortion or not when they're pre-viable? Interesting. When the child is pre-viable. Interesting. That's going to be interesting. And the court declined to grant cert on the question of whether Casey versus Planned Parenthood, undue burden or Hillerstein balancing governs, and on whether abortion providers have third-party standing. Supreme Court starting to cause some problems for the pro-abortion crowd, but not giving the pro-lifers everything they want. All right. We need to move on a little bit. We got some other stuff. We need to talk about Texas. I realize that you all know Texas is awesome. Brisket is the superior barbecue. I realize that so much of my audience lives in Georgia, and it'll pain them to hear me say, I love me some brisket. And my Rec Tech does an incredible job of brisket. My Big Green Egg too. I'm a brisket fan. I love it. Everyone tells me it's super challenging. I have mastered brisket. I love to smoke brisket on my Rec Tech or my Big Green Egg. I love Texas. Texas is awesome. Texas has pretty much every climate you could want. It even snows in Texas. It's got beach, it's got mountains, it's got desert, it's got trees, it's got hills. It's got dope smoking hippies in Austin and great Americans everywhere else. Texas is awesome. I love Texas. I do. I'm a big fan of Texas. I'll probably never wind up leaving Georgia for Texas, but I love Texas. I like to go to Texas. I have lots of friends who live in Texas. And 11 weeks ago, the governor of the state of Texas decided to reopen the state and get rid of all of the COVID mandates. So no more capacity restrictions, no more masks, nothing. 11 weeks ago, Anthony Fauci declared it was ill-advised. Gavin Newsom, the governor of California, said Texas was being reckless. Most importantly, the president of the United States said Texas was engaged in Neanderthal thinking by getting rid of everything. Jen Rubin at the Washington Post declared that Greg Abbott was going to kill more Texans. So 11 weeks later, how many dead people are there? Well, for the first time since March of 2020, there have been no COVID-related deaths in Texas. Texas, according to Greg Abbott, now has the fewest COVID cases in 13 months, has the lowest 7-day COVID positivity rate ever, and the lowest COVID hospitalization rate in 11 months. 11 weeks after doom and gloom, 11 weeks after they're all going to die, 11 weeks after the fear and nightmare scenarios, Texas is doing just fine. This reminds me of the scenario when Brian Kemp reopened Georgia in the end of April last year, when the Atlantic did an article about Georgia's experiment in human sacrifice. And it's turned out okay for Georgia. It's turned out just fine for Georgia. And it turns out that things are fine for Texas too now. The nightmare scenarios that are playing out are nuts. I got to tell you, the CDC director, Dr. Walensky, is not helping matters. The CDC director is muddying the water so much so that there's a loud voice of people complaining, but at the same time, Some of those people are complaining because they themselves want everyone to have to wear masks in perpetuity. I wanna play you some audio now from Dr. Walensky of the CDC.
First, let's just acknowledge where we are in this pivotal moment in this pandemic. For 16 months, we've been telling people, be cautious, be careful, cases are going up, deaths are still very high. And for this very moment, we have cases coming down. They're down a third in the last 2 weeks. Death rates that have never been as low since April of 2020. Things in this pandemic are starting to turn around. And what's also happening is we're getting data, evolving data on the science. Just last Thursday, there were 2 papers that were published in the New England Journal. And then just Friday, this past Friday, there was a large study that was published in the MMWR. And so taking all of these data together, we've been working really actively just this whole last week to try and move the science, move the data to the American people and tell people, deliver the science to them.
Deliver the science to them. She wants us to believe that when 2 weeks ago she was telling people that their kids on the soccer field needed to be masked, 2 weeks later, things change. And, well, she still says young children need to keep wearing masks around unvaccinated people.
I want to ask you about a scenario that Dr. Lena Wen wrote about in the Washington Post. Here's what she said. She said, let's say you go to the grocery store. It's crowded and few people are masked. Perhaps everyone is vaccinated, but perhaps not. What if you don't have childcare, so you had to bring your kids along? They didn't choose to remain unvaccinated. The shots aren't available for them. Surely it's not fair to put them at risk. So let's just get practical here. Is it safe for that unvaccinated child, even in a mask, to be in a grocery store when people around them could be unmasked and not following the honor system because they're not vaccinated?
Thank you for that question. We were going to be at this period of time. We knew that there was going to be a time where we had the majority of Americans who wanted to be vaccinated, and yet the children were not going to be eligible yet. And we are working really hard. Let's celebrate the fact that this week we also got news that we can vaccinate our 12 to 15-year-olds. We hope by the fall, by the end of this year, we'll have vaccine eligible kids eligible at even younger ranges. And what we're saying is those kids should continue to wear a mask in those settings. We recognize the challenge of parents who can't leave their kids at home, should be masked in those settings, and to the best of their ability to keep a distance. The recommendations for those settings have not changed.
And do you trust that people who are not vaccinated, given what we've seen over the past year plus, will actually keep their masks on?
You know, I think that people who were not inclined to wear a mask were not inclined to wear a mask before Thursday.
But some of them were mandated to do so, and those mandates are lifting in part because of your new guidelines.
Yes, and what we're really asking in those settings is to say, in terms of the honor system, people have to be honest with themselves. You're protected if you're vaccinated. You're not if you're not vaccinated.
Okay. This is starting to infuriate me. It was kind of funny. I made a point on a clip that we put up on Instagram TV about people wearing masks, and you could tell that about 3/4 of the people who commented on it heard the first 10 seconds without the rest of it. They got all mad with me about the efficacy of masks and points I had made because they didn't click through to get the rest of it. Let's deal with this for a minute. If you get vaccinated, if you get the COVID vaccine, why do you care about the unvaccinated people? The media is hand-wringing about the unvaccinated people of America. Why do they care? At some point, the burden has to be on the unvaccinated, and that point should have been a month ago. You've got people in the media wringing their hands over the idea that there may be unvaccinated people in the crowd, and they could be spreading COVID still and not wearing their masks. So go get your vaccine. This is Dana Bash talked to the head of the CDC about an op-ed by Lena Wen, and the CDC director said, you know, people are on the honor system. Well, here we go from Lena Wen. Last Thursday's abruptly announced guidance from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention has devolved into a giant mess. Governors and mayors were caught by surprise, leading to a flurry of rapid changes and a patchwork of desperate regulations across the country. Businesses found themselves scrambling without the tools they need to relax restrictions for the vaccinated while protecting the unvaccinated. Stop right there. Businesses found themselves scrambling without the tools they need to relax restrictions for the vaccinated while protecting the unvaccinated. Why can't the unvaccinated protect themselves? Why can't the unvaccinated protect themselves? If we're going to be pro-science, if we're going to deal with the science says that if you're over the age of 21, hell, if you're over the age of 12 and have access to Pfizer, you can get the vaccine. If you're over the age of 21, you can get any of the vaccines. If you're over the age of 16, you can get any of the vaccines. They're readily available in the United States right now. In every state, there is no longer a vaccine shortage. If you want it, you can go get it. And guess what? If you're in your 20s or younger and you get COVID, you virtually have no problem whatsoever. You'll be fine. Death is exceedingly rare. Even major symptoms are exceedingly rare. So why do businesses need to protect the unvaccinated when the unvaccinated can protect themselves? Let's continue with this. While many people happily shed their masks and celebrated the apparent end of the pandemic, others are concerned that with only 37% of the country fully vaccinated, this relaxation is premature and could lead to a resurgence of infections. If such a head-scratching turn of events had occurred under former President Donald Trump, the administration surely would have been blamed for the lack of coordination and resulting widespread confusion. The Biden team has excelled on many aspects of the COVID-19 response, but this was a major blunder that threatens to set back much of the progress made. President Biden needs to fix it urgently. Most important, Biden should own that it was a mistake to cede this level of responsibility to the CDC. After watching Trump repeatedly sideline the agency, seemingly for political reasons, the Biden administration understandably has wanted to elevate the CDC's role. But there's a big difference between listening to scientists and ceding policymaking to one scientific organization. Trump supporters might complain about a double standard, but intervening in this case wouldn't be about politics. It would be for the public good. Hello. Isn't it for the public good that we get back to our lives? You know, for those who are listening to health care experts alone, there's actually a balancing act that has to be done between the economic advisors and the healthcare experts and the assumption of the risk. It's almost as if the left in this country wants the government to do every risk assessment for us, and as long as there's a risk, they don't want to do anything. You can imagine at some point they're going to demand a ban on cars because they're not 100% safe. People can still get in a car wreck. You can get the virus. In fact, vaccinated people can get the virus. Bill Maher from HBO, fully vaccinated and got the virus. Guess what? He has zero symptoms. None. And if everyone gets vaccinated, everyone who gets COVID is going to have zero symptoms or very minimal symptoms. Hospitalization, death, exceedingly rare. You're more likely to be in a car crash than go to the hospital once you've gotten the COVID vaccine. At some point, people have to get back to assuming risk for themselves. The idea that businesses need to protect the unvaccinated at this point. You know what? Protect yourself. Protect your family. Don't rely on the government and don't rely on others to protect your family. And most Americans get this. That's why there's been a rush on buying guns in the last year from first-time gun owners, because they understand they got to protect themselves. Americans understand you got to take matters into your own hands and protect yourself. Why aren't the major pundits, talking heads, the elite in this country, and public health officials able to recognize that? Ironically, it's the CDC that has finally recognized, you know what? People got to live their lives and take responsibility for themselves. If you want to wear a mask, wear a mask. If you don't want to wear a mask, don't wear a mask. This isn't hard. If you want the vaccine, get the vaccine. Nobody's going to make you take the vaccine. If you don't get the vaccine and you get the COVID, okay. You took the risk, you lost. Hopefully you'll be fine. None of this is rocket science. The fact that they are insisting at this point that you wear a mask because there are some people who may not get the vaccine is insane. If people don't want the vaccine, they don't have to get it. You don't wear a mask at this point, you don't have to wear a mask. I went to the grocery store this weekend 3 times. The downside of living closest to the grocery store is that you go repeatedly. I went and never wore a mask. And you know what? More than half the people in the store had stopped wearing a mask. And you know what? I couldn't tell who was vaccinated or not vaccinated. And guess what? I don't care.
You can follow Erick around social media at
Hello and welcome. It is Erick Erickson here. The phone number, if you want to be on the program, is 877-97-ERIC, 877-973-7425. I was just thinking of this. You know, it's really too bad that Israel did not bomb the Associated Press, Al Jazeera, Hamas headquarters last week. If Israel had bombed the Hamas building the AP was working out of last week, the American press would not have covered it. Or they would have just given it just a passing mention because it would have distracted from the Liz Cheney, Donald Trump coverage. It's amazing over the weekend that the news networks were just in full-blown coverage of the Liz Cheney matter, even more so than this situation. You had Dan Crenshaw on with who was it? Chuck Todd. Sorry, Chuck. Totally forgot your name for a minute. It's been one of those weeks, folks. Yes, Dan Crenshaw was on with Chuck Todd, and they had some interesting exchanges. And Crenshaw basically saying we're not going to get rid of Donald Trump within the Republican Party. It's quite fascinating to me that the media continues to obsess about this issue. And again, the big issue here is the media is obsessed with it because they want to hurt the GOP in 2022. And they believe, and there's polling out there they're relying on that shows the closer one is connected to Donald Trump, the more likely they are to lose. Now, you can believe the polling is wrong, and at this point, I don't trust any polling given how bad it was in 2020. But the media, of course, continues to rely on the polling and convinces themselves that these are just anomalies. But this is, you need to understand this. The polling suggests, whether you agree with the polling or not, whether you think it's wrong or not, the bulk of the American polling out there suggests the closer one is to Donald Trump, the more likely that person is to not be successful in an election. Therefore, the media hopes to tie every Republican to Donald Trump. And the way to do that is to keep the Liz Cheney, Donald Trump fracas at the forefront of people's minds. So, for example, ignore the Israel situation. Ignore the gas shortage. Ignore the crime wave. Ignore everything in Washington, D.C. except this fight. Keep it right up there in people's minds. And then go into 2022 hoping to discourage Americans from supporting Republicans because Donald Trump is still there. You know, Donald Trump's not going to be on the ballot in 2022. That's why it's hard for the Democrats. And if you need a case study in this, consider Georgia. In the January runoff, in the suburbs, there was a 6-point swing of white suburban college-educated voters to Loeffler and Perdue. When Donald Trump was not on the ballot, white suburban voters swung back to the GOP. The media's strategy here is to try to keep those voters from swinging back to the GOP nationwide by essentially trying to claim Donald Trump is on the ballot in 2022. Now, 2022 is actually going to be a referendum on the incumbent president of the United States. They're doing a lot of damage control on that, claiming it's no big deal. But it actually is a big deal. And the whole thing is going to spiral out of control, I believe, for the media because Americans are smart enough to realize, actually, no, Donald Trump's not on the ballot, and we've got to stop the progressive left. The media doesn't understand the cultural issues at play in the American electorate right now. The media keeps screaming to the Republicans, why aren't you focused on issue A, B, and C instead of Dr. Seuss? Well, because Dr. Seuss will continue to persuade voters the Democrats are insane and held hostage by even more crazy people. And that'll work for the GOP. The media doesn't understand that because they're in a Democratic bubble. The Republicans do understand it, and there's ample polling on that effect. Now, speaking of crazy inside the bubble Democratic Party stuff, when we come back, we've got to actually spend a little bit of time on a story. I was going to put it here and spend a moment on it, but the more I've thought about it, I want to dwell on this story. The Jeopardy contestant, who Jeopardy contestants tried to cancel because
15.
he showed the number 3 with his hands, and they interpreted it as something sinister. Greetings, hello, and welcome. It is Erick Erickson here this Monday. I sure am glad you're with me. The phone number is 877-97-ERIC, 877-973-7425. Truly delighted to have you with me here, and you can call in if you want to be a part of the program, and I'm going to talk about a story that I don't know that it's going to get talked about a lot, or it will in passing, and truth be told, I was going to just touch on this in passing. And I've decided, the more I've thought about it today, I really thought, I really need to spend some time focusing on this story. Because there's actually, it's of a certain variety, and so bear with me on this while I dive in. This is Ben Smith, who is now the media commentator for the New York Times, has a story, and if you haven't heard who Kelly Donahue is, he's a Jeopardy contestant. And I want to read for you just the opening of Ben Smith's story here. It's an ironclad rule of the private Facebook group of past Jeopardy contestants that nobody post about that night's episode before 11 p.m. Eastern Time to avoid spoiling the show for West Coast viewers. So the moderators of the group waited until 11 p.m. sharp on April 27th to reassure the roughly 2,800 fellow members that they had the crisis in hand. They had seen a contestant on that night's show, a big white guy with a red tie, Kelly Donahue, make an odd gesture with 3 fingers of his right hand. Based on the evidence we've seen being bandied about elsewhere, there is a real possibility he was giving either a white power or a 3%er hand gesture, wrote one moderator, a middle school teacher, who was on the show about 5 years ago, according to screenshots provided by another group member. And though we can't know his intent, he continued, we're not here to provide safe harbor for white supremacists. They weren't the only ones who noticed the gesture. About 50 viewers had tweeted about it, suggesting variously that it was a symbol of the KKK or of QAnon, and Jeopardy contestants searching Mr. Donahue's personal Facebook page saw what they considered other damning evidence, including a picture of Mr. Donahue in a red MAGA hat. One leading member of the group wrote us a public letter, another emailed the Anti-Defamation League to report the incident. A full 595 former contestants eventually signed on to the final draft of the letter, asking why Jeopardy hadn't edited out the moment. It went on to proclaim, we cannot stand up for hate. We cannot stand next to hate. We cannot stand on stage with something that looks like hate. Their statement received wide coverage, particularly in Massachusetts, where Mr. Donahue worked as a bank examiner for the state government, and the CBS local news called it a social media firestorm. A headline on the fact-checking website Snopes got much less attention. No, Jeopardy champ Kelly Donahue didn't make the white power hand gesture. So what happened was this guy, Kelly Donahue, was on Jeopardy 3 times, three days in a row. And at the end of day 1, he held up his finger 1. He had won that day. On the second day, he held up the fingers by his chest 2. And on the third day, he did 3, but it's almost the OK symbol, which apparently, if you believe the left now, making the OK symbol is a white supremacist symbol because it supposedly represents a W and then somehow you hold it upside. I don't quite understand. And a P for white power or some such. Kids playing the OK game. If you know what the OK game is, you hold your hands up. I'm doing it on camera. You make the OK symbol, and if someone looks to see what you're doing, you punch them, and kids have gotten in trouble around the country. It's gone viral. People on Twitter trying to shame them and get them expelled because they're playing the OK game. And, they're making a white power symbol. It's a white power symbol. moral outrage of nonsense. So this guy is on Jeopardy 3 times and makes the 3 symbol. He, normally most people do the 3 with their 3 middle fingers. They fold their pinky and their thumb behind them and they do 3. He did his, starting with his index or his middle finger, his ring finger, and his pinky. He folds over his index finger and his thumb to do the 3. And he's accused by very smart people who are liberal of making a white power symbol. Now, keep in mind, they emailed the Anti-Defamation League. Let me read you a little more of Ben Smith's story. 2 weeks later, the group finally heard back from the Anti-Defamation League, the Jewish civil rights organization that is usually quick to call out anything with the faintest smell of bigotry. Thank you for reaching out regarding your concerns over a Jeopardy contestant flashing what you believe to be a white power hand signal, wrote Aaron Alquist of the ADL, according to texts posted to the group by the contestant who had emailed the group. We have reviewed the tape, and it looks like he is simply holding up 3 fingers when they say he is a 3-time champion. We do not interpret his hand signal to be indicative of any ideology. However, we are grateful to you for raising your concern, and please do not hesitate to contact us in the future should the need arise. Instead of realizing they were idiots, they believed that the ADL was in on it. That's right. The smart people who won Jeopardy believed that the Anti-Defamation League was gaslighting them. Is anyone else feeling gaslit, said a 2-time champion. We saw it. We know we did. But a lot of people, including the GD ADL, are telling us we didn't. That's some classic gaslighting. So the Anti-Defamation League did not tell them what they wanted to hear, so they assumed that the ADL was wrong. Now, I'm going to jump off here and talk about the polarization. Ben Smith goes into this. There is a phenomenon happening in this country now where both sides tend to go to people with their confirmation biases to get their information. And when they hear something that does not confirm their own biases, they get mad at the source, even if they've otherwise respected the source. I have this happen all the time on this program. I will tell you that something you believe isn't true. I've got all the facts and data to back it up, and you get pissed with me for telling you the truth because I'm not telling you what you want to hear. And then you argue with me that the truth is not actually the truth because you went down some fringe rabbit hole. And in going down some fringe rabbit hole, you found a video on the internet of some huckster, scammer, or something who tells you everything you believe was true is true, and therefore that person must be right. The science is wrong. The scientists are wrong. The data is wrong. The objective research is wrong. The numbers are wrong. This guy on the internet you've never heard of before is right. This happens to me every damn day now. The left would have you believe it's a unique phenomenon of the right. The left would have you believe they're too smart to fall for confirmation bias nonsense. They're too smart to fall for the scam. Except a series of Jeopardy contestants, including multiple winners, including a 2-time winner, gets mad at the Anti-Defamation League and claims the Anti-Defamation League is in on a gaslighting scandal because the Anti-Defamation League doesn't tell them what they want to hear, which is that Kelly Donahue, he didn't make a white power symbol. He was announced as a 3-time Jeopardy winner and put his fingers up to signify number 3. As he had done on the day he was announced a 2-time winner, he put up 2 fingers. And on the day he was announced a 1-time winner, he put up 1. But the smart people, smart progressives, decided otherwise. This, I put up that video the other day about masks and people listened to like the first 10 seconds and started lecturing me and didn't pay attention to the point I was actually making, completely drowned out the point. But one person got mad at me for one word. I put up a 6-minute monologue on how I cannot relate to, I'm trying to be sympathetic to, but really can't relate to the people who have said, follow the science, follow the science, follow the science. I followed all the science. The science now says if you're vaccinated, you don't need to wear a mask. And now they're freaked out about the science telling them they don't have to wear a mask. And I have a hard time relating to those people who have said follow the science, and now that the science tells them something they don't want to hear, that it signals, do we follow the science or do we follow our virtue signaling? And they're conflicted. A couple of people, a lot of people got mad at me for the first 10 seconds about masks. They didn't really click through to hear the whole point. I reached out to a number of them and pointed out that I actually was largely agreeing with their point if they actually delved into what I was saying. But one guy got hung up on one word I used. It was like a 7-minute monologue. And I noted that I have a postgraduate degree. Now, the reason I noted I have a postgraduate degree was not to rub it in your nose that maybe you don't, but to point out the left in this country is convinced that if you're a postgrad, if you went to college and then you got a different degree, I went to college, I got a bachelor's degree, then I went to law school, I've got a law degree, and now I'm actually in seminary, was working in the doctorate program, transferred back into master's to finish it back up. But I got a postgrad degree. And the left in this country is convinced that if you've got a postgraduate degree, you are of the left. And you will believe the stuff the left believes. And I don't. But this one guy got hung up on that and thought that I was talking down to my audience. And he's a particularly sensitive person. But he's convinced that I was talking to the audience. I said, no, the reason I pointed out that I'm a highly educated person with a post-grad degree is because the left concludes that if you're a highly educated person with a post-grad degree, you must be of the left, and you will believe the left. And when the left says wear masks at all times, you will therefore conclude it. Only the Hicks and Rubes of the world would disagree. And here I am. I match the criteria for them, and yet I disagree with them. I happen to be a conservative, and they don't know how to box me in there. And this guy was just absolutely convinced. Even when I told him, this is why I did it, he's like, no, you're talking down to me. Rush Limbaugh's your mentor, and he would never have talked down to people like that. It's like, dude, I'm sorry you're that sensitive to one word in a 7-minute monologue. But the point was about the left, as is this. They do it too. They're convinced that you and I, by conspiracy theories, by virtue of being conservatives, we are conspiracy theorists. We are all QAnon because we're on the right. And here, this group of highly educated progressives who have been on Jeopardy have a conspiracy theory. They cannot be persuaded otherwise. When the Anti-Defamation League tells them they're wrong, they accuse the Anti-Defamation League of being in on it. But this gets to a larger issue. Margaret Sullivan is the media columnist for the Washington Post. She wrote a column on the Washington Post is getting its first woman editor, Sally Busby, from the Associated Press. It's fitting that the Washington Post, which is running a piece on the Iron Dome saying not enough Jews get killed because of the Iron Dome for Israel in one piece, that they would hire someone from the Associated Press, which rents office space from a terrorist organization. But she includes this in the piece, and Jay Rosen, who is a journalism professor at NYU, points out that he has a question a subscriber to the Washington Post also had to Margaret Sullivan. Let me read you this. A longtime Post subscriber in Virginia, one of my regular correspondents, had something to say about that in a recent email about the appointment of Busby. Does she understand, really understand, that the United States is on track to become functionally an authoritarian white Christian nationalist state in the very near future? And if the answer is yes, what is she prepared to do about it? Right now, he said, nothing else signifies. This is another well-educated progressive who reads the newspaper. and is convinced, despite all the evidence, we're on the verge of being functionally an authoritarian white Christian nationalist state. And Jay Rosen, highly educated professor, New York University in journalism, agrees. It's not just the right who buys into conspiracy theory. The progressives do as well. And they've lost their mind. The difference between the right and the left is that there are loud voices on TV, radio, and the newspaper telling people on the right, this isn't true. Overwhelmingly, the voices on the left in TV, newspaper, and radio tell them everything they believe is true. And so they're more likely to get trapped in their conspiracy theories than you and me. And then the danger is make that conspiracy theory conventional wisdom. That's insane. This hour of the program brought to you by First Liberty Building and Loan. If you need to have access to credit, capital, loans to grow your business, go reach out to First Liberty Building and Loan. Spend 5 minutes with them. See if they're a good fit. FirstLibertyGA.com is the website. FirstLibertyGA.com. You can get their contact info. If your business needs a loan, 6 figures and higher, they're the people you need to do business with. FirstLibertyGA.com.
Want to be on the show? Call Eric now.
Hello there. It is Erick Erickson here. The phone number is 877-97-ERIC, 877-973-7425. Y'all, spring is here, rain is here, warmer weather is here, but with all of it comes mold and mildew and fungus. Your house gets that musty smell because of all of it. The Eden Pure Thunderstorm can take care of this. The air purifier is guaranteed to kill and prevent the spread of mold, mildew, and fungus, including dangerous black mold. It is a handy device. It is small. It is portable. You can get multiple ones. You can go to EdenPureDeals.com. And when you do, if you go to EdenPureDeals.com, EdenPureDeals.com, you'll see my name, Erick Erickson. And you can get the Eden Pure Thunderstorm. You can get 3 of them right now and save $200. Now, when you look on the website, it's going to say $387 for 3 Eden Pure Thunderstorms. You put it in your cart, however, and then when you do it, you go to checkout and you put my first name in at checkout. You will see when you click the checkout button an offer discount code, and you put in Eric, and it, surprise, takes $200 off the price. You can get 3 Eden Pure Thunderstorms for $187, save $200, and shipping is free. You can get rid of the odor. You can get rid of the mold and mildew and that's floating in the air. You don't have to change filters. It's a great, great device. We have several of them now in our house. So go to EdenPureDeals.com. That's the website, EdenPureDeals.com, and get the Eden Pure Thunderstorm, and you too can clean up the air in your house. Buddy Romer has died. Just real quick, you're just going to have to give me a personal moment here. Buddy Romer, when I was a kid, got elected as the governor of Louisiana. He was a Democrat who turned Republican and ran against Edwin Edwards. Edwin Edwards was the 3-term governor of Louisiana who was really scandal-plagued, and Romer ran on a big reform ticket, and he won, and then 4 years later lost, came in third against Edwin Edwards and David Duke. Now, that was the race that so many people in Louisiana, which is the race where I decided I could not stay in Louisiana after I graduated from high school. That was the race where the KKK Grand Wizard David Duke ran against Edwin Edwards, and so many people had the bumper sticker on the back of their car, "Vote for the crook, it's important." At the time, then President George H.W. Bush, actually as a Republican, campaigned for Democrat scandal-plagued Edwin Edwards, arguing that it was better to have a crook in Louisiana presiding over the state than a racist. And David Duke very much is a racist. Romer was the long shot who got elected. I met him a couple of times, or just randomly. There was a Books A Million bookstore in Baton Rouge, and I would go in it, and he would be in there reading, and went up and chatted with him. Very nice guy. He has passed away after a long illness at the age of 77. Hi there. It is Erick Erickson here. The phone number is 877-97-ERIC, 877-973-7425. What is this? Headline, this just out, Target joins Starbucks. Others in not requiring mask for fully vaccinated customers unless required by law. Target and Starbucks joined a growing list of retailers and restaurants that will ease mask requirements Monday for fully vaccinated customers unless facial coverings are required by local or state law. Companies began changing their policies for wearing masks inside stores and cafes after the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention said Thursday that fully vaccinated people don't have to cover their masks indoors anymore. Walmart, Costco, Trader Joe's, and Publix were among the first to allow mask-free shopping. Home Depot, Gap, and Ulta Beauty have said they would continue monitoring developments but maintain their precautions. Kroger, I think, was also one that was going to require masks. They're not really enforcing it, though. I talked about the mask issue in the first hour of the show today, but this story, Target, Starbucks, let me give you the list of companies here. Target, Starbucks, Walmart, Costco, Trader Joe's, Publix are going to allow the vaccinated, without proof of vaccine, by the way, to not wear masks in their stores, starting now. There's another side of the story here. This is a story about Americans trusting Americans. I mentioned the Jeopardy story. If you're just tuning in, let me recap the story for you real quick. I find this fascinating. A Jeopardy contestant, Kelly Donahue, flashed the number 3 as the 3-time Jeopardy winner. He flashed the number 1 after being declared a 1-time winner, the number 2 after a 2-time winner, and 3 after being a 3-time winner. But some Jeopardy contestants were concerned because he'd used the word gypsy, which they find pejorative. They also found that he wore a MAGA cap. Therefore, they concluded that his 3 was not actually a 3, but a white power symbol. When the Anti-Defamation League told them that it was not a white power symbol, but the number 3 because he was the 3-time Jeopardy winner, these smart people, undoubtedly, unquestionably smart, they've been on freaking Jeopardy. They concluded that the Anti-Defamation League was gaslighting them and in on it. A newspaper reader of the Washington Post wrote to Margaret Sullivan, the newspaper's media correspondent, on word that the Washington Post has its first female newsroom editor who came from the Associated Press. The correspondent was concerned that does this new editor understand that the greatest threat to the nation right now is we are on the verge of becoming a Christian white nationalist authoritarian regime. Jay Rosen, a highly respected journalism professor at New York University, highlighted it on social media and shared the concern. A concern that we're on the verge of becoming an authoritarian Christian white nationalist regime. He actually believes that. He's actually concerned about that. If you read the newspaper, you're a fairly educated person. And this educated person believes it. The Jeopardy contestants are now mad at the Anti-Defamation League for disabusing them of the notion that Kelly Donahue, the Jeopardy contestant, he was actually flashing the number 3. He wasn't actually flashing white supremacy symbol, but they know it. They know he was because he's a MAGA guy and said gypsy. The left would have us believe that only the right descends into conspiracy. And the entire media operations of the United States amplify that. And lack the self-awareness to appreciate that the left does it too. And here we have 2 examples, and now we have this, Target and Starbucks are joining Walmart, Costco, Trader Joe's, and Publix in allowing the unvaccinated to come into their stores without, or I'm sorry, the vaccinated to come into their stores without a mask. And there's a left-wing meltdown over this because, you know, people might lie. And so everyone should have to wear a mask because there may be some liars out there. The common thread of all this is that people on the left do not trust. And by the way, people on the right are guilty of this as well. But really, the most vocal people in America right now on the issue of trusting their fellow citizens are people on the left do not trust their fellow citizens. They have imbibed the idea that this is a racist, a systemically racist nation. They look on this country and think things are bad and getting worse. They don't like people of faith. They really drip with contempt. And because they're the cultural leaders and opinion setters in journalism right now, it's reflected in journalism. There's a woman on Twitter, I try not to nut pick on Twitter. On nut picking is where you pick the one crazy person who says something and say, oh, everybody on this side believes it. When you pick a Jay Rosen, who's a journalism professor at NYU, who's really prominent, and you say this guy really believes we're on the verge of becoming a fundamentalist white nationalist Christian nation, he's nuts. This must be pretty prominent thinking among the intellectual elite of the left. It's fair to do that. When you pick the fringe person with 5 followers and say, oh, they all believe this, that's nut picking. But this person is a doctor, Brittany James. She's got 20,000 followers. She's a physician and activist. Looks like she's got NPR and the Ellen Show and PBS and the New York Times tagged. I guess she's got some dealings with them. She's an associate professor. She's got a prominent following. She tweets this: minding my own business shopping, and a middle-aged white woman asked me if I work there. When I looked at her blankly and answered back in a deadpan voice, no, she giggled it off and said, I was wondering where to put this shirt back. But I'm a bad person if I go off. Kicking myself for not saying I'm a physician and letting her die of embarrassment, but something tells me she wouldn't even have the decency to be embarrassed. Most of these types don't. This is what you call a microaggression. White woman comes up to black woman in a department store, asks if she works there, and the woman says no, and is offended that she was confused for the help. Do you know this happens to me? Walk into Best Buy in my khakis and a blue shirt, and I guarantee you someone's going to ask me if I work there. Go into Target, going to happen. Sometimes I've been asked if I'm the manager, and I am a white dude. This happens to almost every single person. But the left in this country, in charge of cultural and educational institutions, has defined this as a microaggression and has internalized that when it happens to a black person, it is inherently a racist microaggression. Something not meant to be aggressively racist, but is still a level of aggression because it stereotypes and presumes. But it happens to everybody, particularly every middle-aged person in a department store. It will happen to you if you're dressed in a particular way. Doesn't matter whether you're white, black, Asian, Hispanic, it does not matter. And yet, if I point this out, I'm a racist for pointing out that this woman, Brittany James, is hypersensitive, is overly sensitive, should not be offended by an innocent mistake. That happens to a lot of people because the left now presumes that the rest of us are all racist. And there's no one out there that they will listen to disabuse them of the nonsense. If someone comes out and says this isn't true, well, if the person's white, they're a racist, and if they're black, they're an Uncle Tom. It's like the Jeopardy contestants when the ADF comes out and says, look, that the guy was not making a white power symbol. They're like, the ADF is gaslighting us. The media fixates on QAnon. They fixate on right-wing conspiracy theories. They fixate on you and me believing stuff that is not so, and yet they are filled up with a bunch of hatred, knowledge, invective, prejudices, and stereotypes against you and me that are not true, and they will not listen to anyone who tries to disabuse them of it. This is where we are as a country. There's a breakdown of trust. It's a complete breakdown of trust in society. It's a bipartisan issue. The great overwhelming difference, though, is this. There are people in the media, fair and reasonable people in the media, who try to convince you that what you think, based on your confirmation biases, isn't so. And that there are things you believe that are conspiracies. QAnon is a good example. I know a lot of people who believed it, who thankfully no longer do because it never panned out. They kept moving the goalposts, and they finally realized they were being played. And a lot of people in the media were saying it's not true and providing the facts. But it doesn't happen with the left that way. It doesn't happen with the left. Most of the members of the media who want you to understand QAnon was a conspiracy actually buy into the idea that this was a microaggression. This woman, there was a microaggression against her when a white woman asked her if she worked there, as opposed to this happens to everyone, regardless of race. Happens to me, happens to you. There's no one in the media to disabuse the media of the conspiracy theory that we're rapidly becoming a fundamentalist Christian white nationalist nation. Who in the media can stand up and say this isn't true when they all believe it? And that then shapes their news coverage, which then perpetuates you and me running off to our sources of confirmation bias against them. The media in the country is eroding trust in the media. When you have the Associated Press renting a facility from a terrorist group and then denying it and not reporting it, refusing to believe it, and by the way, we now know they've been doing it for 15 years, and it's been documented in other media outlets, and the Associated Press like, well, we'd like an independent investigation. Who convinces the media that they're crazy? I don't know that you can. And I don't know that it'll be fixed, and it'll drive more and more people away from the media. I'm flabbergasted by this Ben Smith story in the New York Times about the Jeopardy winners. When the Anti-Defamation League tells them, I'm sorry, but this guy wasn't flashing a white power symbol, and they're concluding that the Anti-Defamation League is in on the stunt. And when Target and Publix and Costco and Walmart, they come out and say the vaccinated don't need to wear masks in our stores anymore, they get outraged from the left because an unvaccinated person may be in there. And how dare they jeopardize everyone and put people at risk because there may be Americans who lie. What does it matter to them? If they're vaccinated, they have nothing to worry about. And the unvaccinated person has chosen to take the risk. What it is a seething distrust of the other. And their seething distrust of the other is a seething distrust of you and me because of our politics. And in their bigoted self-righteousness, they don't understand that they are being bigots. They actually feel justified in their condemnation and bigotry. There's no difference at this point between a lot of these people on the left and the white nationalists. They're the same people arguing about different things. They're looking in the mirror yelling at each other. They have a deep bigotry and hatred of their fellow American, not based on skin color, but based on ideology. And the result is still the same. I mean, the rhetoric of some of these people in the KKK matches up. It's just one's railing about black people and one's railing about conservatives. One wants the white nationalist Christian ethno-state. The other thinks it's going to happen. And it's not true. But there's no one to tell the media because, you know, if you tell them, much like if you tell this woman it wasn't a racist microaggression, you're a racist. If you tell the media this is nonsense, well, then you're in on the conspiracy theory. I don't know what you do to solve it, but it's worth pointing out that this is exactly what's happening.
You can follow Erick around social media
Hi there, it is Erick Erickson here. The phone number is 877-97-ERIC, 877-973-7425. Y'all, friends, gosh, how can I say this without coming across as a jerk? I don't know that I can, so I'm just going to say it. Bill Gates is a creep, and we all knew it, and it's taken his divorce for the rest of the world to see it. I'm sorry, but there's always been something weird about Bill Gates, and I don't mean that he's a nerdy guy. My goodness, Microsoft board members decided that, this is from the Wall Street Journal, that Bill Gates needed to step down from its board in 2020 as they pursued an investigation into the billionaire's prior romantic relationship with a female Microsoft employee that was deemed inappropriate. Members of the board tasked with the matter hired a law firm to conduct an investigation in late 2019 after a Microsoft engineer alleged in a letter she had a sexual relationship over years with Mr. Gates. During the probe, some board members decided it was no longer suitable for Mr. Gates to sit as a director at the software company he started and led for decades. Mr. Gates resigned before the board's investigation was completed and before the full board could make a formal decision on the matter. Microsoft received a concern in the latter half of 2019 that Bill Gates sought to initiate an intimate relationship with a company employee in the year 2000. A committee of the board reviewed the concern, aided by an outside law firm to conduct a thorough investigation. Throughout the investigation, Microsoft provided extensive support to the employee who raised the concern. A spokeswoman for Mr. Gates said there was an affair almost 20 years ago which ended amicably. She said his decision to transition off the board was in no way related to this matter. Right. So 7 years into a 27-year marriage, Bill Gates was having a fling with someone, and there's more that just is creepy. One source of concern for his wife was his dealings with Jeffrey Epstein. He met with Epstein for philanthropic reasons, don't you know? Better than phallanthropic reasons, I suppose. Mr. Gates was Microsoft's chief executive until 2000, chief software architect until 2006, and chairman until 2014. He continued to serve on the board until he stepped down in 2019. The dude just sounds creepy. He sounds creepy. Now listen, there's a wider story here we should discuss. There is, the founding premise of QAnon is that there is a global child sex trafficking ring of Satanists that is overseen by the CIA. And that Donald Trump, of course, was anointed by God to take on the child sex trafficking Satanists. That's the actual foundation of QAnon. It has morphed from there over time, but the deep state and the human trafficking elements have remained. And, just because there are rich people who are human traffickers, and I want to be careful here, I'm not saying Bill Gates is, but just because there are rich people who are human traffickers doesn't mean that there's some global conspiracy, that there's not some, maybe some of them chat and they're all in on it together, but so much of it intersects with Jeffrey Epstein now. Whether Bill Gates met for philanthropic reasons or not, the fact that Jeffrey Epstein is at the center of this is a red flag for everybody. Aha! Gates was in on it. He's a Satanist child trafficking. There's no evidence of that. But there is just continued evidence that Bill Gates is just a creepy dude. And his billions can do it. And here's the interesting side of it here is that the media is rapidly turning on him. So Melinda Gates is now going by French Gates, which is kind of funny. French Gates, not French doors, but French Gates. Yeah, they're French Gates you can see even more through. By the time Melinda French Gates decided to end her 27-year marriage, her husband was known globally as a software pioneer, a billionaire, and a leading philanthropist, according to the New York Times. But in some circles, Bill Gates had also developed a reputation for questionable conduct in work-related settings that is attracting new scrutiny. In 2018, Ms. French Gates wasn't satisfied with her husband's handling of a previously undisclosed sexual harassment claim against his longtime money manager. After Mr. Gates moved to settle the matter confidentially, Ms. French Gates insisted that an outside investigation. The money manager, Michael Larson, remains in his job. What? Wait, what? He sexually harassed a dude? What? On at least a few occasions, Mr. Gates pursued women who worked for him at Microsoft and the Bill Gates Foundation, according to people with direct knowledge. What? This is... And then there's the Epstein connection. Bill Gates is just a creepy fella, huh? Wow. All right, we're going to move on. All the experts got the gas shortages wrong, and I want to rub their noses in it. We should enjoy this when we come back and point out what all the experts have gotten wrong. Hello, welcome. Glad to have you with me. By the way, those of you who are up in the Habersham County, Rabun County area, I'm going to be up there in 2 weeks. You may see me. Yes, I'll be glad to say hi. I'm bringing my family. I've fallen in love with the area. I'm bringing the family up for Memorial Day weekend. I'm taking a couple of days off. It's been exhausting around here. Welcome. The phone number is 877-97-ERIC, 877-973-7425. Speaking of my wife, y'all, I nearly just wet my pants. So, I do the show in my home office. This is way TMI. I realize it. But I do the show from my office. Now, my wife tends to have a habit of when she comes home from somewhere, she'll stay in her car for a little while and she'll read and catch up on stuff before she comes inside and tackles cleaning up or laundry or what have you. And so during commercial break, I knew she had come home from the gym and walk into the kitchen and the dog is at the door, which immediately leads me to believe my wife is in her car. And then I hear her talking to somebody on the phone right next to me. Oh my gosh. Wow. I'm still like, I still got goose. It scared me so happy. She's right next to me and I had no idea. She's like in the laundry room. There's a jacket hanging down on the door. I'm at the coffee pot. She's right there in the laundry room and she says something to someone on the phone. Y'all, I thought I'm probably nearly jumped through the ceiling. It scared me so bad. It's a wonder I didn't soil myself. I'm sure you all wanted to know, but this is therapy for me. I've got to unburden myself she scared the snot out of me. All right. We'll move on. We will move on. There are continued gas shortages up the eastern seaboard. This is important for a particular reason. The Gas Buddy website has a gas tool where you can map out where gas shortages are and what the prices are. I'm going to pull up Atlanta, Georgia, where I am. And yep, there are still a great many gas stations without gas in the metro Atlanta area, which is remarkable that there is no gas in this area. It's just crazy that we're out of gas at these locations. Now, the reason that I bring this up is because the experts said this would not happen. The experts told us there was not going to be a gas shortage. The experts told us not to worry about it. And the experts were wrong. Now, I say this because this has become the pattern and the practice. The experts told us that there would be war in the Middle East if Donald Trump moved the American embassy to Jerusalem, and it did not come to be. In fact, there was peace in the Middle East when Donald Trump was president, and now Joe Biden's there, and there's not. The experts told us that if we got out of the Iran deal, there would be war. There's not. The experts continue to tell us things that are not so. The experts told us, don't wear masks, they don't help. And then the experts told us, do wear masks, they do help. The experts told us that there wouldn't be any shortages, and then that there would be shortages, and then they blamed all the hoarders. It is a natural psychological phenomenon for people to go stock up when things are running low. When they get word of things running low, people do that. To say there would be no shortages except for the hoarders is to deny human behavior in the process of calculating whether or not there would be shortages, because you and I both know people hoard. Did we learn nothing from a global pandemic and a lack of toilet paper? The experts keep getting it wrong. Part of me is convinced, and I don't really need to be convinced. I think there's actually plenty of evidence for this. part of me is convinced that what happens is the media has a foregone conclusion and then seeks out the experts or the person who will tell them what they want to hear and then gives them the label expert. So the media, to protect Joe Biden, said there would be no gas shortages. The experts said there would be no gas shortages, and then there are, because they had to protect Joe Biden. They constantly do this. And as a result of this, fewer people trust the experts. And a large part of this is, and Tom Nichols, he's a controversial presence, I guess, among the right these days. Definitely not a Trump fan. He's written about the death of expertise and the need for experts. And one of Tom Nichols' points that I think is a meritorious point, even if you dislike Tom Nichols, you can't dismiss the point. And by the way, I like the guy just fine. I know some of you will hate me for saying that. But one of his points that I find to be meritorious is that when the experts start talking outside their expertise and are still claimed as experts, it undermines faith in all the experts. Because the media does this regularly, that they find someone who's in an industry. That person tells them something and they're given the label expert, and they may or may not be an expert. You know, if I call the local McDonald's and I ask them how their sales are going, they're not exactly an expert in the restaurant industry. They take orders at McDonald's. That's different. If I go to my local independent grocery store and ask them what's going on, their opinion may be different from the chain grocery store that has a greater supply chain. And yet the media doesn't distinguish these things. And sometimes there are experts who have agendas. And oftentimes in the media, they have an agenda to protect the president. For example, there is now in the Politico, which is really becoming a talking point, mouthpiece for the left these days. They're running stories on how Joe Biden is Teflon and the Republicans have no attacks against him, and there's no way for Republicans to combat him. The Biden is Teflon analogy. Teflon Joe muddies GOP midterm strategy. David Siders. When the National Republican Senatorial Committee sought to attack 4 vulnerable Senate Democrats in a series of new ads this spring, President Joe Biden was nowhere to be found. Instead, the NRSC juxtaposed photos of the senators next to House Speaker Nancy Pelosi. It's a phenomenon that's becoming increasingly pronounced as the outline of the 2022 midterm election comes into focus. Midterms are typically a referendum on the party in power, so the standard opposition party playbook is to make every down-ballot race about the sitting president, but Biden's elusiveness as a target is forcing Republicans to rethink the traditional strategy. Interviews with more than 25 GOP strategists and party officials depict a president whose avuncular style and genial bearing make him a less than ideal foil. He doesn't induce anger or rage, and at the moment his White House is relatively drama-free. In response, Republicans are preparing to break with the time-honored custom and cast the president less as the central character in the midterm elections than as an accessory to the broader excesses of the left. Biden is not a good bad guy, said Ed Rogers, the veteran Republican lobbyist and strategist. Obama was a haughty professor. The Uncle Joe life story that he has, the tragedy, the losses, the obvious empathy the man has, I think that's all legit. It's hard to demonize him. Except, sometimes the strategy isn't necessary. In fact, at this point, I would say it's safe to say that the Republicans know the media themselves have elevated Nancy Pelosi and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and the left to a higher level, and as a result, they don't have to do it. They don't have to engage. They don't have to go after Joe Biden. More and more Americans, I do believe, are somewhat embracing that Joe Biden is held hostage to the left right now. because Joe Biden says don't do these things and they keep happening. There is a story to be had that the media will not buy because the media doesn't believe it's true, even as everyone else knows it's true, that the left is running roughshod over Joe Biden. Joe Biden is essentially captured by the left and he can't stop them. And that's a story for the Republicans to tell. You may like Joe Biden, but look at what his administration is doing. Does Sleepy Joe even know? Does Sleepy Joe even know? There's a story to be had. There's a story to tell. By the way, you should know that Joe Biden has some new problems as well that are going to make this story even better for the Republicans. Here's a headline at CNN. Biden faces an angry rift in his own party over Israeli-Palestinian conflict. So much attention has been focused on the rift in the GOP over former President Donald Trump's anti-democratic lies about the 2020 election. But Democrats have their own brewing disagreement over how the U.S. should react to violence between Israelis and Palestinians, leading Democrats to question Joe Biden's commitment to human rights and demanding he do more to pressure Israel. It's an awkward public fight for a party that has made its commitment to social and racial justice a main part of its platform. As the U.S. comes to grips with its own history of racism in new ways and adopts the Black Lives Matters movement in a mainstream way, liberals want to apply similar notions of justice to foreign policy, where an increasing number see apartheid in Israel's approach to the Palestinians. Vocal liberals have criticized the White House for placating Israel and ignoring human rights as violence mounts, as well as loudly criticizing Biden for not openly opposing Israel's planned evictions of Palestinian families from a neighborhood in East Jerusalem. I will leave uncommented on the social justice commentary of the article. You get the point, though. But wait now, there's even more, because there's a growing problem for them. Here's a headline out of the Washington Post. Biden administration approves $735 million weapon sale to Israel, raising red flags for some House Democrats. The Biden administration has approved the sale of $735 million in precision-guided weapons to Israel, raising red flags for some House Democrats who are part of the shifting debate over the U.S. government's support for the Israeli government of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Congress was officially notified of the proposed sale on May 5th. 3 people based on Capitol Hill familiar with the notification told the Washington Post. It was nearly a week before Hamas, the terrorist-designated organization that controls the Gaza Strip, began intense rocket attacks against Israel that have reportedly killed at least 10 Israelis. The rockets have been answered with ongoing Israeli airstrikes that have left nearly 200 Palestinians dead and sparked worldwide calls for diplomatic action. Notice the subtlety here. Well, they've only been able to kill 10 Israelis. The Israelis killed 200 of them. The disproportionate. If only the terrorists could kill more Israelis, the Israelis would be justified. Oh my gosh, this is where we are. And now a new generation of House Democrats, more open to questioning Washington's support of Netanyahu, is raising some concerns. That's right, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and the far left, they're upset that this administration, like the last administration, is taking the side of Israel against a terrorist group. It's dividing the Democrats. You know, regardless of the social commentary in the CNN piece, at least they are willing to recognize and understand what actually is going on. That there is division within the Democratic Party, and it risks rocking the peace within the Democratic Party. That's a good thing they're paying attention, but it's also overshadowed by the fact that they would much still prefer to focus on Liz Cheney. I said this earlier. It's a shame that the Israeli-Hamas situation did not happen last week and that Israel didn't bomb the Associated Press Hamas headquarters last week, because the American media would have completely ignored it. They were so busy focused on Liz Cheney and Donald Trump.
News and in-depth analysis from Erick.
Hello there. It is Erick Erickson here. The phone number, if you'd like to be on the program, 877-97-ERIC, 877-973-7425. Now, y'all, you knew I was going to talk about this. You knew it. We can't play the whole audio here. 60 Minutes has tackled the UFO story. This is reading from the CBS News story of it. It's the story of the U.S. government's grudging acknowledgement of unidentified aerial phenomena, UAP, more commonly known as UFOs. Unified aerial phenomenon instead of unidentified flying object. After decades of public denial, the Pentagon now admits there's something out there, and the U.S. Senate wants to know what it is. The intelligence community has ordered the Director of National Intelligence and the Secretary of Defense to deliver a report on the mysterious sightings by next month. So Bill Whitaker of 60 Minutes interviewed Lou Elizondo and says they're real. Elizondo spent 20 years running military intelligence operations worldwide in Afghanistan, the Middle East, and Guantanamo. He hasn't given UFOs a second thought until 2008. That's when he was asked to join something the Pentagon called the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program. The mission was simple: to collect and analyze information involving anomalous aerial vehicles. What I guess in the vernacular you'd call UFOs, we call them UAPs. And it was part of a $22 million program sponsored by Harry Reid. Now, we've seen the videos. Ryan Graves, a former Navy pilot, says it's a security risk. He's seen UAPs hovering over restricted airspace southeast of Virginia Beach in 2014 when they updated their jet's radar, making it possible to zero in with infrared targeting cameras. Now, he says it's hard to spoof that. He says the photographs were taken in 2019 in the same area, that there are more and more objects there. There was no exhaust plume. Ryan Graves is asked, could it be Russian or Chinese technology? He says, I don't see why not, and says, I am worried, frankly, if these were tactical jets from another country that were hanging out up there, it would be a massive issue. But because it looks slightly different, we're not willing to actually look at the problem in the face. We're happy to just ignore the facts. The government has ignored it, at least publicly, since closing its Project Blue Book investigation in 1969. But that began to change after an incident off Southern California in 2004, which was documented by radar, by camera, and 4 naval aviators. David Fravor is one of them from the Top Gun Naval Flight School. Now, here's the thing. There is a theory that what we're seeing, these unidentified aerial vehicles, is maybe it's the Chinese or the Russians. It could be China. It could very well be something that has developed. Here's Lou Elizondo. In some cases, there are simple explanations for what people are witnessing, but there are some that are not. We're not just simply jumping to conclusions saying, oh, that's a UAP out there. We're going through our due diligence. Is it a new type of cruise missile technology China's developed? Is it some sort of high-altitude balloon conducting reconnaissance? Ultimately, when you've exhausted all those what-ifs and you're still left with the fact that it's in our airspace and it's real, then it becomes compelling. Here's the thing that you got to pay attention to here that is concerning. The Chinese have, for the last several years, been building up their military by stealing our intellectual property. So it becomes implausible that the Chinese are capable of developing drones that seem to defy the laws of physics when they've been having to build their military by stealing our intellectual property. Likewise, it doesn't seem something the Russians are capable of doing. Maybe it is. Maybe if we ever go to war, we'll discover that the Chinese and the Russians have technology far advanced to our own. It just on the ground does not appear to be so. So what is it? Listen,
30.
I'm still in the aliens and demons camp, to be quite frank with you. I think that you got the angels and the demons. It's not aliens, it's angels and demons. Listen, I mean, the Bible says they're there. They're just the things unseen. What if we're seeing them and they're trying to provoke us into doing something? That's my crazy theory of the day. no crazier than it's UFOs and aliens, if you think about it. Hello and welcome. It is Erick Erickson here. The phone number is 877-97-ERIC, 877-973-7425. I've got to talk about a story that I talked about, a year ago or so. And this one I'm fascinated by. So, sometime last year, maybe it was the end of 2019. I remember talking about the story. The story is about Richard Montañez. Richard Montañez is the man who came up with the flaming hot Cheetos. And the story goes that he was a janitor at Frito-Lay's Rancho Cucamonga plant. And the CEO of Frito-Lay was looking for new ideas. And he, as a janitor, dreamed up the idea of a chili-covered Cheeto. And believed in himself so much, he called up the CEO. And they tried to block him from meeting with the CEO. The CEO forced it, and he finally was able to come in and reveal reveal how he had come up with the idea. And basically what he had done is he mixed together the flavors of his community. He thought that the flavors of Central America were missing, and that he had some connection to them, and he could bring them about. And he wrote a book about it, the Flaming Hot, the incredible true story of one man's rise to top executive, from janitor to top executive, and he's told the story all over. And I remember when the book came out, I talked about this, and it was impressive. And at the time, Frito-Lay said yep, or at least did not say no. And it really was an incredible story that this man was a janitor in Rancho Cucamonga in California. The CEO had an all hands on deck, I want to hear from anybody ideas. And this janitor thought that the CEO was talking about him and came up with this idea, focus grouped it in his Hispanic Latino community. Everyone loved it, and called up the CEO's office, explained that he was a janitor, and the people thought he was nuts. And he was like, well, the CEO said he wanted to hear from me. He was able to finally get through to the CEO after all of these people tried to stop him. The corporate backstabbers tried to sabotage him for thinking more than he was in life. And he rose through the ranks at Frito-Lay to become a marketing executive. The problem is, it turns out the story's not true. And there's now he released the book, and now a movie is coming out. And turns out the story he told, the story I told when I read it originally, it's not true. And Frito-Lay, which did not push back when his book came out and did not push back when the story first came out, is now saying, wait just damn minute. This is from the Los Angeles Times. Montañez has made a lucrative second career out of telling and selling the story, appearing at events for Target, Walmart, Harvard, and USC, among others, and commanding fees of $10,000 to $50,000 per appearance. His second memoir, Flaming Hot, the incredible true story of one man's rise from janitor to top executive, is out in June from an imprint of Penguin Random House. A biopic based on his life, to be directed by Ava Longoria and produced by Christian super producer Devon Franklin for Searchlight Pictures, is set to begin filming this summer. Both the book and movie were sold after bidding wars. Montañez's story is undeniably hot, but it turns out he didn't invent the Flaming Hot Cheetos, according to interviews with more than a dozen former Frito-Lay employees, the archival record of Frito-Lay itself. None of our records show that Richard was involved in any capacity in the Flaming Hot test market, Frito-Lay said in a statement to the Times in response to questions about an internal investigation whose existence has not been previously disclosed. We have interviewed multiple personnel who were involved in the test market, and all of them indicate that Richard was not involved in any capacity. This doesn't mean we don't celebrate Richard, but the facts do not support the urban legend. Flaming Hots were created by a team of hotshot snack food professionals starting in 1989 in the corporate offices of Frito-Lay's headquarters in Plano, Texas. The new product was designed to compete with spicy snacks sold in the inner-city mini-marts of the Midwest. A junior employee with a freshly minted MBA named Lynn Greenfeld got the assignment to develop the brand. She came up with the Flaming Hot name and shepherded the line into existence. Montañez did live out a less Hollywood version of his story, ascending from a plant worker to a director focused on marketing. He also pitched new product initiatives, which may have changed the path of his career. But Montañez began taking public credit for inventing Flaming Hot Cheetos in the late 2000s, nearly 2 decades after they were invented. First, he talked about it in speeches at local business and philanthropy award ceremonies. Then the online media, hungry for a feel-good story, took his claims viral. And nobody at Frito-Lay stopped him. Most of the original Flaming Hot team had retired by the 2000s, but the few who remained let the story spread unchecked. Lynn Greenfeld contacted Frito-Lay in 2018 after first seeing that Montañez was taking credit for Flaming Hot Cheetos, triggering a company investigation. That process unearthed evidence, calling his account into question, and led the company to the conclusion it shared with the Times. We value Richard's many contributions to our company, especially his insights into Hispanic consumers, but we do not credit the creation of Flaming Hot Cheetos or any Flaming Hot product to him. The producers of his biopic, despite being informed of problems by Frito-Lay in 2019, announced a cast for the movie in May. The producers of the film and the publishers of the book did not respond to requests. The core of his story rested on the pitch meeting he says changed his life, where he sold his idea of Flaming Hot Cheetos directly to Frito-Lay Elite. In his new memoir, he lays out a dramatic scene with more than 100 people, most of them leading executives, assembled alongside the CEO in a conference room at the Rancho Cucamonga complex to witness his presentation. The Times spoke with 20 people who worked at the Frito-Lay divisions responsible for new product development 32 years ago when Flaming Hot Cheetos were first extruded into existence. None recall anything like the episode Montañez described taking place. If the story existed, believe me, we would have heard about it, said Ken Lukashka, who worked as a product manager for the core Cheetos brand when Flaming Hots were rolling out nationally. This guy should run for office if he's that good at fooling everybody. Naturally. Now, I can stop there. This story, the Los Angeles Times lays out this story with internal promotional videos, documentation, memoranda, interviews, everything, and thoroughly debunks the story. The record of Flaming Hot Cheetos first entering the market in 1990 points to an impossibility at the heart of Montañez's story all along. In telling after telling, Montañez says he felt empowered to invent Flaming Hot Cheetos after watching a motivational video from Enrico, the CEO of the company, that encouraged all Frito-Lay workers to act like owners. And time after time, he says that Enrico was the CEO whom he boldly called to pitch his idea, and that Enrico flew out to Rancho Cucamonga weeks later to witness his pitch in person. And he clearly restates this claim. Enrico's name appears 60 times in the text. But the CEO did not work at Frito-Lay when Flaming Hot products were developed. His move to Frito-Lay was announced in December of 1990. He took control at the beginning of 1991, nearly 6 months after Flaming Hots were already out in the test market. When the Flaming Hots line first entered test markets in the summer of 1990, Robert Beebe was leading Frito-Lay. Wayne Calloway was running the parent company, PepsiCo. Enrico was the president and CEO of PepsiCo Worldwide Beverages, the separate soft drink division of PepsiCo, leading the company in the Cola Wars. None of it pans out at all. Now, the media ran with the story, and the reason I spend so much time reading through this in the LA Times is I distinctly recall covering this story, and part of this is me doing my due diligence to correct the record well after any of you have even remembered the story. But man, do I remember the story. It was an impressive story, and it turns out it's BS. But the other reason to focus so much on the story is to get to the point where you know exactly what's going to happen. It is the tale of intersectional collisions. It turns out it was a white woman who came up with the idea of flaming hot Cheetos. And it's a Hispanic man who claims he came up with them. So who is morally correct? Not who's truthful, who's morally correct. Whose claim, a white woman or a Hispanic man who was a janitor? And by the way, everyone agrees the man was a janitor. He was a school dropout. He got a job at Rancho Cucamonga's Frito-Lay plant in the 1970s. He rose through the ranks, became successful, and made a career out of it, and then told the story. And the Hispanic community has rallied around him. Eva Longoria has picked up his story. She's going to direct a movie about him. And who's to tell them that their truth, his truth, is not true? Who's to say? Because we live in intersectional postmodern times. He made up the story. It's not true. The archival evidence shows it. The eyewitnesses show it. The documentary evidence is there to show it. The timeline doesn't even match, but it's his truth, people. It is his truth. And how can a white woman and a corporation owned by a bunch of white people overrun his truth? I'm kind of impressed by the intersectionalism of this and the whole thing colliding. And they're not going to walk it back at this moment. Now, I suspect when you got the LA Times coming out and focusing on this and the internal investigation and all that, I suspect we're going to have a hard time with Frito-Lay being able to push this story back. Eva Longoria has chosen actors. She says that her biggest priority is to make sure they tell Richard Montañez's story authentically. The filmmakers were told of the problems. The legal team for Frito-Lay forwarded a letter. So now you know what's going to happen, of course, is that it's going to be a mostly truthful account. And it's probably not now going to be Frito-Lay in the movie. It'll be some other company, and it'll be a mostly truthful story. In fact, the LA Times says that there's a kernel of truth beneath his story, visible through its inconsistencies and supported by the documentary timeline. There's the real story of a man rising up the corporate ladder from factory floor to marketing executive, pitching some products along the way. He did drop out of school. He did get a job at Frito-Lay. There was a motivational I own the new Frito-Lay campaign that rippled across the company. There is a news clipping featuring Montañez providing a window into this moment in his career. There is a 1993 story on businesses finding success empowering their employees. There is a section on Frito-Lay talking about the plant Rancho Cucamonga, where manager Steve Smith has taken up the initiative and got more frontline workers thinking how to improve the business. There is veteran machine operator Richard Montañez, 37, becoming so energized that he developed a new ethnic food concept aimed at the Hispanic market. After testing recipes and outlining a strategy, he burst forth with the kernel of an idea: flaming hot popcorn. Flaming hot popcorn did hit the shelves in 1994. So the story gets conflated. The media runs with it. I made the mistake of running with it yet again. It's a feel-good story in the media. It went viral all over the internet. Now it turns out it's not true. And in the truth crashing into the lie, we have the intersectional fallout in Hollywood over how can you tell this story. And they're, by the time this movie comes out, they're all going to be fighting with each other. The white women, the Hispanic community, you name it. Who gets to tell the story of the flaming hot Cheetos? You and I, we will sit back and we will laugh as the intersectional wokes fight it out over the authenticity of a story over a bag of potato chips. Well, over a bag of Cheetos. We're going to have more of these stories, you realize, as more the intersectional fallout, and you have to weigh who has a more valid moral truth. The intersectional white woman or the intersectional Hispanic man? Does the intersectional Hispanic man identify as a white Hispanic or a black Hispanic or a Hispanic? And we'll all have to, we'll all be judges, and then we'll have to pick a truth because there won't be one. There will be all sorts of them in the fallout of the stories.
Honest news and conservative views.
Hello, it's Erick Erickson here. The phone number is 877-97-ERIC, 877-973-7425. Memorial Day, it's in about 2 weeks. It's time to stock up on steaks and burgers, and Omaha Steaks can help you with their Let's Go Grill package. If you go to omahasteaks.com and you put Georgia in the search bar, you'll see the package. You're going to get 12 burgers for free with this. 12 burgers. You can grill them up for Memorial Day, put them on your Blackstone, put them on your grill, put them on your pellet grill, whatever you want. You can cook them up, and they're delicious. They really are delicious. As a matter of fact, we had some last night. What you do is you go to omahasteaks.com, put Georgia in the search bar. You get the Let's Go Grill pack. You get steak. You get burgers for free. The burgers are for free. The steak and the pork chops and the chicken breasts and the sausages and the caramel apple tartlets, they're all part of the package. You get $20 off your first order, and you make your family happy. And with everybody going back outside, taking their masks off, getting back together with friends and family, having the world go back to normal, you can celebrate the return to normalcy with Omaha Steaks. They make it easy for you. And again, you get $20 off first order. You get 12 burgers, 12 burgers. You get them. That's almost 4 pounds of meat. You get them for free with this great package, the Let's Go Grill pack from Omaha Steaks. Go to omahasteaks.com and put Georgia in the search bar, and let's go grill. I'm going to turn this into a promotional event here at the end for a group that is not an advertiser, because I get asked all the time, why Erect Tech? I feel like I need to record this, and maybe I'll just put it on the Substack page. We don't need to push out an email on it. I'll just put it up there because I get asked a ton. I've got a Rectech. I've got a Big Green Egg. I don't use it as much because I wanted something now that it takes less time to set up and get going and gives me good product. And I researched the snot out of grills, pellet grills. I've got a big grill that I do most of my grilling on. A pellet grill cannot get as hot as a Big Green Egg or as a standard propane or gas grill or charcoal. It can't. But of those, if you want to do serious grilling, the Rectech gets hotter than the others. So you can actually grill, you can sear a steak or a burger on a Rectech. It gets over 500 degrees. I've got the RT700, that's 700 square inches of grill space. So it's got size. Most every one of the pellet grills on the market is made in China. The parts are produced in China and then shipped here where they're put together. Some are completely put together in China. Traeger, for example, is put together in China. Rectech does get the essential manufacturing process done in China for the parts. The parts are heavier steel than your average pellet grill. You go to your standard big box hardware store and get one of their pellet grills that's for sale, and it's going to be an inferior grade of steel than the Rectech. It has a heavier steel that holds up over time. They're all produced in China. Rectech actually produces its computer parts, though, here in this country, unlike the others. So the computer parts actually last longer. They have a better warranty. The interior coating isn't likely to peel off like with a lot of them. I looked at all those. I tried out several. I tried out Traeger. It didn't get as hot as I wanted. The Rectech holds its heat better than a lot of them. So that's why I went with it. They're also made locally here. They're over in Augusta, Georgia. And I use mine all the time. I can actually turn it on with my phone. While I'm sitting here in my office, I can turn on my Rectech over the internet, which is impressive. And I can get it up to speed. In fact, I did this. So my wing recipe, everybody asked me about this. You can take the wings and they're frozen, and you can put them on frozen on your Rectech. And you put your frozen wings on at 250 for 30 minutes, and then crank up the temperature to 450 for 30 minutes. And you can do it all remotely on your phone, which is great. Now, I put mine on at 250, and then at 450, or after 30 minutes, I take them off, toss them a little more in some rub and baking powder. The baking powder crisps up the skin. Put them back on at 450, and they turn out fine. I got a batch last night, though I did, and I was somewhat disappointed by the quality of the wing. Generic brand, will go nameless. I typically use Springer Mountain Farms because they make a really, really good one. But that being said, I love my Big Green Egg. I genuinely love a Big Green Egg. I get consistent results with the Big Green Egg. But I finally got to the point after like 10, 11 years, I wasn't challenged by it. And I was like, I don't want to be challenged anymore. I just want to be able to flip a switch, get this thing up to speed without doing a lot. And with the Rectech, you got pellets and a big hopper. I don't have to go add charcoal. I don't have to clean it out every time. I don't have to do any of that. And that's why I've fallen in love with my Rectech. I hope that helps. I'm sure none of you were interested, but I was. Well, I know you are because I keep getting comments and questions and emails all the time. Why Rectech? That's why. This isn't an ad. I just happen to love the product.